Hey gang, I swear I didn't time this one around the Daymar rally, which just wrapped up, let's see, last weekend or the weekend before. But it does have nice synergy. If you followed this channel for any length of time, you know I'm all about synergy. So this one will probably be a short one, mostly because the loop itself isn't overly complicated. Thankfully, I'm not paid by the minute to make these vids. Or at all, now that I think about it. Well, unless I can get on that sweet ball shaving or VPN money, I guess. One day. Maybe. Where was I? Right, racing. Let's get this. Caveats up front. This is pretty typical, but as this one will be a short one anyways, and kind of a niche within a niche, I won't leave a long-winded caveat here. Basically, the gist of it is that I'm just a dude on the internet. These are just guesses on my part of what CIG may do, not necessarily what they will do or even what they should do. Just something that's a possibility while giving a breakdown of the loop as I see it. This is by no means exhaustive, as just meant as an overview. So what you see me doing here is just practice, but racing actually holds a special place in my heart. For my own game, I came up with racing, basically I called it Soul Burner was my racing loop, specifically because it's just a shift from the combat and industrial loops. It's just fun. I mean, it's obviously competition, but it's fun. And in a lot of ways, as I'm doing here, you're competing against yourself as well, trying to beat your last time or your best time overall. Let's talk more about me for a minute here. While I was filming this, I remember that the oldest game pack I have is the Light Speed package, which is the 350R along with a couple little other bits. Like I think it came with like a racing jacket or a racing undersuit. I don't think they've actually put that in the game yet, but I could be wrong. Of course, I eventually CCU'd the 350R into a Prospector years ago and never really looked back. But it says something that was my first purchase for this game, or at least my oldest package. I guess I have really fond memories of playing Mario Kart both in high school and in early college, because I'm old as balls, people. Anyways, racing. It's weird I haven't done it more in this game, especially since CIG just kind of decided to plop pretty much the whole loop on us in a surprise move a few patches ago. Well, part of the loop at least tier 0 of the racing loop. This part. So no idea if this is the correct term for this style of race or not. Again, I'm not a racing guy. But basically these sprints are shorter races, at least in the distance of the track, that you must complete a certain number of laps and place in the top 3 or so. I think it's like 3 or 5 of the participating racers. So pretty standard stuff, particularly if you're familiar with Mario Kart and the like. If you place high enough, you unlock the next race in the circuit. At the moment, I think Stanton has about 12 tracks or so, but it might have more. And I wouldn't be surprised if more were planned, and that's just Stanton. There's a good chance that each system will have at least some sprint tracks like this. Maybe not quite this many because Stanton is a pretty heavily populated place, but yeah. I would think pretty much all the systems, and maybe even the Xi'an ones, will end up having at least a handful. Maybe not the Vandal ones. Maybe. Kind of depends on how Squadron shakes out in that one, I suppose. But this loop is pretty much as it will be in its final version. They might refine some mechanics, but racing games are pretty well understood. And while I died plenty of times just trying to learn these tracks in Arena Commander, the few I've played are pretty technical and fun. It's not all about speed, and some of my better laps were where I focused on keeping a steady pace and timing my turns rather than to flat out try to burn my way through the track. There's probably a message in there somewhere. But speaking of the Daymar Rally, that's a really good segue into this. Endurance racing is kind of the opposite of the sprints. While the idea of hitting checkpoints is the same, the track is over a vast distance. CIG supports Daymar Rally, and I think a couple other races along the same vein, but even prior to that, they've had lore about huge races that stretch across the whole of a system, or maybe even further, I think. The GN have a whole subculture built around endurance races, so yeah, this will definitely be a big part of the game. Maybe not a huge loop that everyone will partake in, but it'll be a legit way to make a living. Honestly, with 323 being in the oven this long, and most of the loops being broken, one of the reasons I've popped into Arena Commander to practice is to maybe try some of the races in the verse and see if I could even place in those races. Probably not, but actually I don't think a lot of people are running the races right now, so maybe I'd place in first by default, I don't know. The one reason I haven't tried it in the actual verse to this point is that it's kind of a pain in the ass. See how many times I blew up even when I wasn't flying that aggressively? That happens in the verse, and it likely means 20 minutes or so before I can even get back to the racetrack, much less race in it. And that's a pretty huge penalty. But this is where endurance races and race teams come in. In Star Citizen, you'll likely be trailed by a team with res beds and spare high-performance parts that racers require. And more than just spare parts, chances are good they'll have a spare whole ship just in case something happens. There will probably be repair ships and the like too. It'll be a whole production. And this is even more true of the endurance races, which are more about how far you can push your vehicle and how far you can push yourself. With the engineering loop coming up in the nearest future, solo racers, at least for these endurance races, will probably be unheard of. You just won't have the means to complete the race, I wouldn't think. You're going to have components fail, especially if you're redlining to stay in the lead pack, and that's going to cause critical failures on your components. That's part of racing too. One of the things that would be really cool about the racing loop is that it might be one of the ones that CIG doesn't even have to really put all that much effort into. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that so much of the loop is the players knowing their individual craft. For example, while I was doing this, I was wondering if a Terrapin might not be a good racer. Just run the thing in VTOL mode on some of those tight turns. Maybe. Okay, probably not, but still. Anyways, I feel like racing is something most people understand, so no reason to beat this dead horse anymore. I'll just wrap up with this. CIG has dropped several hints and flat out said that they'll probably be inserting some more racing modes into the game as we go on. We know they did the PTV, the little golf carts. They put that racing into the game. And actually, now that I think about it, that's one that I tested pretty hard in the PTU, but I haven't actually done it in the live build yet. So yeah, maybe I should try that. I don't think you could actually die doing that one. But on that topic, vehicle races like the Daymar Rally will be a thing, and I wouldn't be shocked to see some ground vehicle specific racetracks make their way into the game in the next year or three. CIG has even mentioned the possibility of a foot race, which would be interesting. You definitely wouldn't want to do it in heavy armor, I wouldn't think, and I'm not sure how we deal with the fact we can't drink with the helmet on, and the fact that we lose water so quickly in the current builds. But yeah, there's options on their way for this small but pretty fun and pretty interesting loop. How about y'all? Have you done the races before? Do you think that this will be your main loop in the game? And finally, I guess I'll close on this. While he primarily streams on Twitch, Croncy, who I'm putting a link to in the upper right here and down in the down below parts here, he's one of the main voices and organizers behind the Daymar Rally and other big races in the game. He's started posting here on YouTube a bit more, but his channel is still criminally small for as much as he does in this community. So if you get a chance to go give him a sub, he does really good work. And that's all I got for this one, gang. I think I have one more loop I'm going to talk about, but now that CIG is dialing up their content again, there's a good chance that I'll be spending more time talking about that rather than the various loops I can think of. Till then, I suppose. See me next time.